We're spending our last days in Mazar Sharif, which is known for the Blue Mosque. Hard to pick favorites on this trip because we've seen so many beautiful mosques, but I think this one has to do it for me. It is fantastic. So many blues, so many details, so much space, so much light here. We're here right in time for sunset, so call to prayer is going to start, and I know the energy is going to be beautiful.
Wow, so many people.
Today we are in Balkh. This is one of the oldest cities in the world. It was a natural source of water, so when trade routes were passing through, people used to stop here all the time. It was also a center for Buddhism. We are standing actually here in an old Buddhist temple, but then the Arabs took over, and when Islam started to spread, this became a very popular place for Islam still to this day. People used to pray here 5 times a day. So it's not a mosque, but it was kind of considered a mosque for some time. But we are going to visit some other mosques here in Balkh later on today. When we get invited, A, because it's the Taliban, and B, because culturally saying no is kind of a sign of disrespect. So I wouldn't be surprised if we end up in some local media as like, oh, these Americans that are here and with us, and look at how safe it is. So that brings me to the next point, which is that tourists are essentially a different entity here. So the things that we experience and how we experience them are very, very different than how the locals would. So we're driving through Balkh, and every time that you come to a different province or a different region, you have to go through a checkpoint where you show your documents and your permits, which is why these permits are so important, which is why these guides and translators are so important. And oftentimes when we go through these checkpoints, which are Taliban checkpoints, we get invited either to some tea or just to have a conversation. And today, for the first time of this entire trip, we were invited to speak to one of the local leaders and his posse, and they actually gave us full security. Now, this area is very safe. However, they just gave us a couple of soldiers or Taliban dudes, I don't know what the right term here is, but we literally have like an escort in front of us, and they're taking us to some of these places and showing us around, for lack of a better term. Visiting the local markets has been by far our favorite activity. It's the best place to people watch, to see how they interact with each other, to see the things that they buy. One of the things that's not uncommon here is seeing kids working. And I mean kids, like from a very, very young age. You'll see them in shops that either their families own, on the farms, and it's kind of a part of the culture to assume that you're going to be working for your family or working to support yourself or to help support your family. Majority of the country is in poverty, so that's been probably one of the biggest culture shocks, just seeing how young the kids are that work. But nevertheless, local markets, big vibe. I showered, I'm in Doha, I feel like a brand new person. I could finally speak about how Jerome and I got detained in Pakistan International Airport yesterday. So Jerome and I arrived to Pakistan. We didn't have a visa because we were basically transiting. We actually applied for a single entry visa, but we didn't get it in time for our arrival. So we had a really long layover in Pakistan, which did not require a visa. We were basically just coming off of the flight from Kabul and waiting in the lounge until our next flight to New York. And we knew that we had to get our luggage to recheck it. And when we get to the immigration counter, we give our passports. We told them that we had a visa because we entered Pakistan previously. There was a bit of a language barrier. Long story short, they thought that we're trying to enter Pakistan without a visa. And instead of communicating with us normally, they sent security. Security brought 2 boarding passes and said, you guys are flying back to Kabul. So we have security with 2 new boarding passes. There was a flight to Kabul in like 30 minutes. They printed new luggage tags, and they're like, run, we have to go, we're making this flight. And I'm like, I'm not going on a flight back to Afghanistan. I have a flight to New York out of Islamabad. We're in Islamabad. We're not getting on this flight. Like, there's no way. We had about 30 people surrounding us, police officers, immigration officers, staff at the airport, telling us, threatening us, telling us that we're going to be cuffed, we're going to be detained and put on the flight in handcuffs, but we have to go to Kabul, that they're going to put our luggage and they're going to give our passports to the captains. They literally held the flight for 2 hours. They delayed the flight to Kabul because we refused to get on the plane. And I said, I'm not getting on the plane. I don't care. This went on for over 3 hours. I was calling the US Embassy. I was trying to reason with them. I was explaining to them that all we need to do is go into the transit zone, that we were not trying to go to Pakistan. We literally just wanted to get our luggage, to recheck it back in. True, maybe like we misunderstood. There was a misunderstanding, miscommunication, but regardless, sending us back to Afghanistan is not going to do any good to anyone. And this went on for hours and hours and hours, and we were fighting and we were holding our ground, and we kept getting threatened and interrogated, and we were just like, we're not getting on the flight. Even the captains of that flight came out and told us, guys, we need to leave. We have a sick passenger on board. We have to make it to Kabul in the next hour. Please get on the flight. And Jerome and I were just like, it has nothing to do with us. We don't have to be on this flight. We're just trying to get home, back to the States. So almost after 4 hours of all of this, we had the head of the immigration office come out, checked our tickets, our confirmed tickets back to New York, and he basically just let the flight go to Kabul, apologized to us, took us to the lounge and said, okay, you could spend the next, however many hours here until your next flight. So we ended up spending 19 hours at the airport, with about 4 hours of this like really hardcore interrogation. And honestly just realized how much of a privilege, and we know this, but it was confirmed how much of a privilege it is to have an American passport, to be able to call the embassy, to be able to say, hey, like, we're American, like, we're not dealing with this, we're going home, we have our tickets home, and we're going back to America, period, not to Afghanistan. This was easily the craziest travel story I've ever had.